Every morning at Ashfell Castle, the maids curtsy to empty rooms. It doesn't matter that the royal in question left an hour ago, that the bed is already stripped and the window already open to let out the night air. The rule is older than any of them, older, some say, than the castle's granite itself, and it has never once been suspended. You bow to the space where the crown was. You bow to the absence. 16-year-old Nora Fenwick learned this on her second day of work, when the head housekeeper caught her walking straight through the Duchess's sitting room without so much as a nod toward the empty armchair. The room remembers who sat in it, the housekeeper told her. So will you. Nora didn't understand it then. By the end of her first summer, she did. The story of Ashfell begins, as these stories often do, with a man who fell in love with a piece of land before he ever told his wife. Prince Consort Edmund of Verndale saw the valley in the spring of 1849, a soaked, half-forgotten hunting lodge advertised in a newspaper he'd picked up by accident. He rode out alone to see it, paid for it quietly with money that wasn't entirely his to spend, and only mentioned it to his wife, the reigning Queen Isolde, once the papers were already signed. By the time she saw it herself, the old lodge was already coming down. Edmund had commissioned a new castle of pale granite, and he involved himself in every detail, the pitch of the roofline, the width of the windows, even a set of carvings above the main door meant to represent each of their children. He wanted narrow hallways, deliberately narrow, so that a family scattered across 150 rooms would be forced to pass each other, to nod, to remember they belonged to one another. Some architects of the day called it a cold, oversized barn. Within 20 years, half the great houses in the region had copied it anyway. The estate grew the way estates do, quietly, acre by acre, until it swallowed forests, hills, a loch, and eventually a private rail spur built for no reason anyone could explain except that Edmund wanted it. It was never public land. It never has been. When timber is sold or a cottage let out to tourists, the money has always gone to the family directly, a fact that has needled more than one government minister across more than one century and changed nothing at all. Here's what nobody tells you when you take a job at Ashfell. The wages are modest, the hours are long, and the real cost isn't printed anywhere in the contract. It's the not speaking. Nora learned the hand signals before she learned where the good linens were kept. A tap on the wrist meant someone's coming. A flat palm meant stop, don't move. 2 fingers to the lips didn't mean anything so simple as quiet. It meant pretend you were never in this hallway at all. The rule, as it was explained to her, was not that you couldn't hear the family. It was that you could not be seen to have heard them. There's a difference, and the difference is where a career lives or dies. She broke it once, in her first autumn, dusting a hall table when 2 voices drifted low and unhappy from behind a half-closed door. She didn't try to listen. She simply forgot, for 3 or 4 seconds, to make herself invisible. A senior maid caught her eye from across the hall and gave the smallest shake of her head. Keep moving. And Nora did, heart hammering, feeling for the rest of the day like she'd stolen something she couldn't give back. She got a quiet word from the housekeeper that evening. Not a warning. Not yet. Just, the walls hear plenty. Don't let anyone catch you hearing the same. The staff who lasted longest, she came to realize, weren't the hardest workers. They were the best at disappearing. Once a year, in the last week of summer, the rules bend, though they never quite break. The Ashfell gathering has been held every September since the estate's earliest years, a single night when the family and the staff share the same floor, the same music, the same room. The reigning royal opens the first dance with a member of staff, chosen by lot or by whim depending on who's telling the story. A hall boy who spent the year hauling coal might, for one waltz, take the hand of a duke. Invitations are still printed on 2 different stocks of paper, gilt-edged for staff closest to the family, plain for everyone else, because even generosity at Ashfell comes ranked. Nora danced there once, in her 3rd year, with a laughing underfootman named Calm who kept miscounting the steps. She remembered thinking, spinning under the old chandeliers, that this was the only night all year the house exhaled. At midnight, the family withdraws. The staff bow, deep, silent, synchronized, like something rehearsed since childhood, because it has been, and then the lights come up properly and the real dancing starts, the kind that doesn't have to be watched. For one night, some of them were allowed to use the family's first names. It was, Nora thought, The closest Ashfell ever came to admitting they were all just people standing in the same cold building. The castle has secrets the way old houses always do, not hidden in safes, but soaked into the plaster. There's a stretch of hallway on the second floor where, decades ago, a young woman practiced an abdication speech she never intended anyone to overhear, pacing back and forth so many times that the runner carpet still shows a faint path worn into the weave. There's a nursery window, boarded now, where 2 boys were kept from a radio for an entire terrible afternoon so that grief could reach them gently instead of all at once. The staff who worked those days never spoke of them. Not because they signed anything, although eventually everyone did, but because Ashfell teaches its people early that some rooms are for living in and some rooms are for guarding. A cleaner leaked a photograph once of a children's treehouse tucked into the old oaks, thinking it harmless, a pretty thing. Within a week the windows nearest that clearing had been quietly curtained, and photography anywhere on the grounds was banned outright. It wasn't punishment, the housekeeper told the staff. It was correction. Ashfell doesn't forgive gaps in its walls, it closes them. Long before Nora ever curtsied to an empty chair, a young woman named Fiona Marsh worked 8 weeks at Ashfell and never came back. She'd needed the money badly enough to take the job, and needed it badly enough, later, to sell what she'd seen there to a magazine that paid her more for one interview than she'd have earned in years of scrubbing silver. She talked about dinners, about which dogs slept where, about a small, unguarded moment at a formal table when a guest mistook a rosewater finger bowl for soup and drank from it, and the family, rather than let him feel foolish, quietly lifted their own bowls and drank too, one after another, until the whole table had done it and no one could say who'd made the mistake at all. It was, by every account, a kind story. Fiona told a few unkind ones as well, and the family never spoke to her again in any capacity, and within 18 months every new hire at Ashfell was signing a legal secrecy clause that hadn't existed before her. She used to say the money changed her life. She never said whether she thought it was a fair trade. By the time Nora had been at Ashfell 6 years, she'd stopped counting the people who came and went. The gardens alone lost most of their staff in under 2 seasons. The work was punishing, done without machinery because the family had decided, with the best of intentions, that the grounds should be tended entirely by hand. It was a beautiful idea. It broke backs. She watched maids arrive certain they could handle anything and leave within a year, quietly, sometimes overnight, taking hotel jobs in the nearest town instead, worse prestige, better heat, better pay. She watched a housekeeper get shouted at in front of guests over a smudge on a picture frame and say nothing, not one word, and go home and cry where no one could see it. Nobody published numbers on any of this. Nobody had to. The staff kept their own private ledger, passed down maid to maid, of who'd lasted and who hadn't and why, and it was more honest than anything that ever made it into a magazine. Nora Fenwick stayed at Ashfell for 11 years. She left, eventually, the ordinary way, not fired, not leaked, not sued. She simply finished, one autumn, and didn't renew. She still curtsies sometimes, she admits, to empty rooms in her own small flat, and laughs at herself for it, and does it anyway. Some habits outlive the reasons for them. What she remembers isn't the grandeur. It's smaller than that. The particular hush of a hallway at 6 a.m., the weight of a full tea kettle on a cold morning, the specific relief of laughter with people who understood exactly why you were tired without needing it explained. She remembers a house that asked everything of the people who kept it running and rarely said so out loud. She doesn't know if Ashfell has changed since she left. She suspects it has, a little, the way these places always do, a few degrees warmer in the attic rooms, a few more days of leave on paper. She suspects, too, that some rooms will always be curtsied to, whether or not anyone is watching, because a house like that doesn't let go of its rules.